This is White Plains Week, the weekly roundup of White Plains, Westchester, and world news. With John Bailey, editor and publisher of the daily internet newspaper White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, WPCNR.com. Jim Benneroff, editor and publisher of SuburbanStreet.com and WhitePlains.com. And me, Peter Katz, formerly with NBC, ABC News, and stations from Boston to Los Angeles. White Plains Week, what's happening, who are the newsmakers, what's in store for the future. The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the participants. White Plains Week is presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76, Verizon Fios Channel 45, and on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. Now, White Plains Week.
Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. White Plains, Westchester, and the world. White Plains Week, John Bailey, the Citizen Net Reporter, here with the anchor for all seasons, Peter Katz, and Jim Benneroff is on assignment this evening. First of all, we want to recognize that this week was the 100th anniversary of the birthday of the great Jackie Robinson, who spearheaded the end of segregation in the United States and also was the first African-American to play Major League Baseball.
Well, let me disagree about the end of segregation in the United States. I think
that's
segregation
true, right.
is alive and healthy if
yes,
you look for it.
Yes, you got to keep fighting it all the time.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Peter, the headlines, please.
And here are the headlines for the program as we begin the month of February. How did that happen? February already?
Yeah. And January was a long month. So.
You know what tomorrow is? It's
Groundhog Day.
Ground Cat Day.
Ground Cat Day.
Yes,
Cats taking over the world.
If any of our cats see their shadows, that means we're in deep trouble, right? Anyway, the apartments keep on coming here in White Plains. The RPW Group has proposed 303 apartments to be built at its site at 1133 Westchester Avenue. That's now a big corporate site, lots of businesses in there, lots of offices in there, lots of things going on in there, lots of parking spaces, and they say that they have an excess of parking space and they can use some of that for these apartments that they're proposing. The DPW department to install 2 new water tanks at the reservoirs, cost $21 million. That's a lot of gallons of water we have to buy.
Well, they're very
to
old
pay
tanks.
For that. Yeah.
Yes, and then one backs up the other.
I think wasn't it Bud Nicoletti many years ago who first said, gee, we have to do something about these tanks?
Yes, he did.
So we say thanks to Bud Nicoletti for, no, never mind.
The monologue continues.
It sure does.
Yes.
The DPW is working on a computerized sewer capacity monitor. They hope to have that in place by April, which will allow them to analyze whether the sewer system needs expansion as more apartments either come online or are proposed for the city. The city will not close the Good Counsel property public hearing for 3 months or so because it wants to hear more on the environmental issues and other things. The Common Council has turned the page now, and Milagros Lacona and Dennis Crolian have announced that they will not run for 4th and 3rd terms, respectively, on the council. Frankly, I think if they had not announced it, they still wouldn't be running because I don't think they would have gotten the nominations because they have been somewhat
rumor has it
opposing of the party line on some things. The Democratic City Committee nominating committee settles on an all-woman slate for the 3 council seats to be up in November. The air freeze chills White Plains, New York, USA with a quick-moving blizzard. I mean, it was a whiteout for about 20 minutes the other day, and 3-degree temperature readings. Burr, in a word.
Dropped like a boulder.
Now, the White Plains Housing Authority says none of the 137 apartments at 86 DeKalb Avenue experienced temperatures below what the county and the city say should be the minimum. Now, News 12 had reported on a big problem over there at that building, and the Housing Authority says wasn't as big as News 12 reported. Mayor Roach has done what we, among others, have been nudging for the city to do for years and years and years, long before Roach came into office. And he has agreed that from now on, they will televise the work sessions.
Which should be on right now if you're watching this on Monday night.
And the people to be heard. Not people, citizens to be heard.
Citizens to be heard,
Yeah,
right.
people to be heard is something else. That's
Yes,
the program
you can
John
always
does.
see that,
Yeah.
but you can't always see citizens to be heard.
Yeah, so citizens to be heard, that's a session for a half hour before the regular
Yeah, well,
monthly
this is
meetings.
really great. Open government, just what we want, exactly.
Yeah. The government in Washington is back at work, and President Trump and Nancy Pelosi are going at it like Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn. Well, it was Katharine Grant, maybe Rosalind Russell.
That's true. And
In
His Girl
His Girl
Friday.
Friday,
That was
yeah.
a great movie.
In any event, as you no doubt know, Nancy Pelosi got the better of Donald Trump, and he caved on the matter of the government shutdown, and they opened the government. Now the government people are back at work, but there's the threat of another Trump shutdown.
2 weeks to
looming.
go, right?
Yeah, we
Before
will
the
see.
next shutdown.
We will see. The New York State Gaming Commission this week approved the purchase by MGM of Empire City Casino from the Rooney family. How much? Well, I've seen the structure of the deal, maybe $500 million, maybe more, maybe closer to a full billion. We will see how that shakes out.
Following that money around for this big bonanza, which will save New York State, maybe, right?
Who knows?
Right. Okay, we're done on the headlines. So let's
Finally.
go to the White Plains Week video newsreel without video today. March of Time, February 1st, 2019, and that is Robert Weish of RPW Group in the lower left talking about a brand new apartment development. Next slide. And there is his new lawyer, Michael Zarin, who is representing him now. And next, let's take a look at what we're looking at.
Now, they did a presentation
Yeah,
at a council work session this week, and that was a work session that wasn't televised,
No.
as it turns out. But this is pretty significant news because the city had paved the way for something like this to happen by
Years ago.
adjusting the zoning
Yeah.
along Westchester Avenue. And we have seen on the Harrison side of things all sorts of apartments being proposed. We've seen the start of the construction for a new Wegmans, giant supermarket coming in over there. And now in White Plains itself, basically what the developer says is that we have excess space. We have about 20 acres that we're really not using, and we have parking lots, so we have an excess of parking capacity, which we're not using. And we think that there's a market for apartments on this site. As you may recall, there was a hotel proposed for the site. That got nowhere. But now the trend is to make apartments a hot commodity along Westchester Avenue.
And this is the reverse angle of what we showed you next, and that's a little clearer view. Maplemore Golf Course in the upper right. The orange lines in the middle, those are the buildings proposed, 303 apartments and 3 buildings. And the lower left green spot, that is the German school. And this is looking towards the Cross Westchester Expressway, up left-hand corner, and the Hutchinson River Parkway over to the right. So
now, what it really
is.
shows is that there is no neighborhood in very close proximity to where they are proposing to build this. So
No.
you would think there will be no neighborhood opposition once you
I
look
wouldn't
at
be
that
so
map.
sure.
That's true. You never can be so
No.
sure about that.
I mean,
but-
that's a hobby in White Plains.
But you know, one would wonder if you were living in that area, what your objections could be. Well, that possibly could have something to do with traffic. But then the developer would be quick to point out that we have a lot of traffic during the daytime, as Monday through Friday, as people go into and leave the offices in here, so
He also-
essentially at night there's no activity there. And that's when people come home to their apartments. And he also says that this could be a very environmentally sensible thing to do because it would allow people, in theory, to live and work on virtually the same site to walk to wherever
Yes, if you
they
could get a
need to
job
go.
over at 1133.
Yeah,
Yes, that would be nice. Maybe they'll have a job fair.
maybe.
That's true, but it's going to supposedly be completed in 2021, giving him a real leg up in the apartment market in White Plains, because everything else appears stalled at the present time.
Although,
with
you know,
one exception.
if John, if you're going to live out on Westchester Avenue, if you want to have an apartment there, it really doesn't matter whether it has a White Plains address or a Harrison address. If that particular type of neighborhood is what you want, you know, then it really doesn't matter which side of the border you're on.
No, it certainly doesn't. But the next up, a water modeling project was introduced by Dick Hart, the Commissioner of Public Works, in connection with his talking about the $21 million project to replace 2 water tanks and also to build a new pipe leading over to those tanks. And this is a big project, but what he really was very excited about was this hydraulic and water quality modeling project, which just showed them how the water flows, the water that you drink flows through the city, and how much is used. And he is going to do a similar project like this for the actual sanitation sewers, which is really important because, as we pointed out in the show, we were worried that the sewers might not handle the effluent from the 6,000 apartments coming on stream in the next 7 to 8 years. Maybe.
Well, you know, as any city gets more affluent, it increases the effluent. Write that down, everybody. And now, at the end of the Common Council meeting Monday night, the Good Counsel site came up. That is what we showed you last week, and we said that the developer was trying to get a fast approval on this Monday night's meeting, which is coming up. Yeah, they were pushing to close the hearing already, so we can
Not
move
going to
on
happen.
and get our votes. So they have basically said, no, we're not going to close this for at least 3 months.
That's right, which would enable them to schedule an approval in July.
They
Maybe.
can do that. You know, July is not a bad time to approve projects. People are on vacation.
Out in
They
the
don't pay
Hamps,
much attention.
right,
Yeah,
yes.
you go to the Hamptons.
Well, that's July and August are the big decision months in White Plains, New York, USA, folks.
John, you're being too cynical now. Stop that.
Cynical? John Bailey cynical? Perish the thought. It's just these guys behind me. They talk about
is that what it
cynical,
is?
you know. Let's see. Now, coming up next there were some choices made.
Choices.
Democratic choices.
Choices.
And we had an announcement from Milagros Lacuna. A letter went out to many Democrats, and that she would not run for another term on the Common Council.
Well, you know, I mean, we were among those who speculated that Crowley and Lacuna would not be getting the Democratic nomination to run again.
Right, and Monday,
largely because they have been independent-minded. They have spoken up when they felt there were things that needed to be addressed. They have not been reluctant to express their disagreements with the particular direction that things were heading. And when you do that, sometimes you tend to offend party leaders.
Yes, we remember Glenn Hockley and Arnold Bernstein and Bill King were not allowed to run again in the past. So this is a modus operandi. You play ball, don't ask questions, enjoy your stipend.
Now,
If you're not willing to do that, you get in trouble.
We also remember Milagros in particular actually decided to buck the establishment by running for mayor.
Right, and it was now we expect some challenges because here is who was nominated by the committee, from what we understand. Nadine Hunt Robinson, who is now presently an incumbent, will be running for her second term. She is expected to be nominated by the nominating committee. Victoria Presser and Jennifer Puja are also expected to be nominated, and this is their first time running for office. Now,
one has to wonder what happened to the three guys who ran with Luquona. Remember, they challenged the party ticket.
Yes.
Tried to get the nomination. Wonder what happened to those guys.
Well, it's unfortunate because they were young and up-and-coming fellows, and but right now we have an all-women ticket expected to be nominated for the district leader's approval in a couple of weeks. Now, this is going to be interesting if a disappointed person, Kat Bresler, tries to run a primary, but she should get a good election lawyer because her signatures will be challenged if she tries to do that.
That's what usually happens,
yeah,
and that's
right.
why when you're if you're going to do a challenge and you go out there to get signatures on petition, you want to get many, many more signatures than are required to be on the ballot, figuring that they will do their best to knock off.
Yes. Jennifer Puja is the Labor Council Director of the Westchester Putnam Central Labor Body. And
okay,
so
well, that's nice.
10-year career there, and has risen to that position. Well respected. And
I must admit, not being active in Democratic circles, but having been in White Plains for more years than I would care to count, I just don't know those names, and I'm not familiar with those people.
They will carry you out of White Plains with your boots on.
Are you familiar with those people? Have you ever met them?
I interact with them.
You do?
I slide among them.
Okay.
That's right. Now, big weather happenings this week. The air freeze hit. That's what it looked like on the last day of January.
It's called an Arctic vortex that we have been hit with.
Yeah.
And
I like air freeze better, Peter.
It's a result of global warming, climate change they call it, but it's global warming. It's a result of a lot of energy from heat being pumped into the atmosphere, and that causes a very high wind direct situation to bring down lots of cold air from our north.
Right.
And it has not been as bad here as it's been out in Chicago and Minneapolis and other sections out that way.
It was cold.
It was very cold.
Very.
I
felt like a piece of meat at Benjamin's Steakhouse.
The heating system is running overtime, and I think a lot of people are going to be shocked when they get their Con Ed bills.
Yes, you don't really want to see it. It's still time to lock in your electric rate.
Or your gas rate,
yes,
or some
right.
rate.
Some rate. And now last week we told you about the News 12 story about heat dipping below County and White Plains
The story
minimums.
was basically they had a boiler problem over at 86 DeKalb. That's a housing authority building. So News 12 carried it, and the housing authority, it essentially said there's much less here than meets the eye last week. Although we could not get any official statement out of them.
But they did issue one on Saturday, and it was from Mac Carter, and Mac said no one went below any minimums. There was only one complaint, and that's his letter right there. And the two boilers responsible for heat have computerized brains and may have been under strain while trying to regulate heat to balance outside-inside temperatures. So we know there was some problem with the heat, but he claims they were not people that were not as cold as they said they were on television, basically. And
well, I don't know. I mean, he didn't really allege that this was fake news.
No, he didn't. But
so there was a problem. Perhaps it was slightly dramatized by the time it got on television.
Well, unfortunately,
or maybe not. You don't know.
But
we can only go by what they say. And
that's
so
right.
now we after asking, now we know what they say.
That's what they say, and they will be having a meeting.
And they said it after we recorded the program last week.
Well, they were doing an investigation at the time, according to the letter, but at least they got it out, and now the world knows that White Plains keeps its people warm.
Good.
Right,
That's
exactly.
important.
Right. Now, the other thing that happened at the Common Council meeting was that Mayor Roach decided that the Common Council citizens to be heard would be televised, and also that work sessions would be televised and held in the main chamber. And this is a good thing. And next,
Well, you know, occasionally the mayor's conference room would get incredibly crowded, stuffy during the summer, especially.
they love doing that in the summer.
Because if they had a controversial issue, a lot of people would try to pack in there, either to hear what was being said, because
They couldn't speak.
generally during work sessions, there's no public input, and for years and years they refused to televise it. Now the capability to televise has existed. It would not be terribly difficult or expensive these days to broadcast those sessions. Certainly, over the years, it could have been done just by videotaping it. Even if you didn't carry it live, you could set up a camera, let the camera run, and then play back the tape at some point. But they wouldn't even do that. Again, this had started long before Roach came into office.
In the middle of the Delfino administration.
So it's nice to see a change in policy and to see some more transparency.
Ah, yes, a breath of
fresh transparency.
clarity vortex, right?
Yeah,
That would be very nice. Well, look, I congratulate it. It's a great move for democracy, and I, as a journalist, John Bailey, endorse this policy change.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, that's right.
Any other policy changes you'd care to endorse?
Hey, there's a lot of policy work going on down in Washington.
Oh.
Can you update us now the government is reopened?
If we tried to write this as a novel, we'd be laughed out of any publisher's office. But now that we have the government reopened after the government shutdown, it looks like we're on track for another government shutdown, because Trump, as of this morning, is taking a very hard line and says he wants the wall. And he had said, well, maybe a fence, maybe slats. Maybe he said it could be called a peach. A peach? Yeah, a peach.
How about a force field that you don't see?
But now he says wall, and I want the wall, and so we're back to thinking medieval wall, and Nancy Pelosi is not going to give it to him, and there clearly will be no funding in any bill that comes out of the House for border security, nothing that will say wall on it. So we'll see. The options will be he'll either close down the government again, which would be a politically outrageous thing to do, and for the sake of the country an outrageous thing to do, or he will declare a national emergency, which will allow him to assert the powers of a dictator, which we think would be something he'd enjoy.
He would enjoy that.
Roger Stone, his longtime friend and aide and colleague for like 40 years, was arraigned this week in the Mueller probe. Roger Stone pleaded not guilty. It's been said that in the raid during which Roger Stone was arrested in Florida, they confiscated a treasure trove of notes and computer records and possibly incriminating emails. The U.S. is backing out of the nuclear arms treaty with Russia, the White House and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced this morning, just shortly before we started recording this program. The Trump administration says that Russia isn't keeping up its end of the bargain of the INF, the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Arms Treaty. President Reagan is the one who signed that and who pushed it. And when he did, he said, we need the treaty and we also need verification of the treaty. Instead of pushing for verification, which is what our NATO allies would like to see, the Trump administration says, we're going to pull out of this. And we're going to set the stage for creating a new, dangerous, expensive nuclear arms race with Russia. And wouldn't you know it, That's precisely what Vladimir Putin would like to get out of that treaty.
Now, why would he want to get out of the treaty? Well,
For
you have to
far
ask
too
yourself
long,
that question.
the Russians have been violating the treaty.
Yes.
And the U.S. should be forcing verification that they are complying with the treaty. But under the Trump administration, they're not doing that.
What's next? A new missile crisis?
Now, they're also lying by saying that the NATO allies support this move, and the NATO allies are terrified at the possibility now of having an arms race in Europe. Oh dear. Trump has unveiled a new plan on drug pricing. And one of his campaign promises was to do something about drug pricing. Well, so what they're going to do is they're going to block the government from negotiating better prices with the drug manufacturers. Medicare
Maybe
will
they'll
be
lower
blocked
them
from
on
that.
their own.
And it says that consumers can now deal with the drug companies to try to get better prices. So, John, go ahead and call up a giant drug company and tell them you want a better price. See what happens.
How about eliminating drugs that are really bad for you?
This new policy was announced by Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar this week. Ridiculous.
Who was, I believe, connected to the drug industry. Is he
House
not?
Speaker Nancy Pelosi reacted saying this proposal puts the majority of Medicare beneficiaries at risk of higher premiums and total out-of-pocket costs, and puts the American taxpayer on the hook for hundreds of billions of dollars. We reported months ago that Trump, who convinced his voters he was strong on illegal immigration, was lying, and he really exploited illegal immigrants, hiring them for his construction projects and workers at his golf clubs and resorts. Now it's been confirmed that right here in Westchester, at the Trump National Club in Ossining, managed by his son Eric Trump, they have for years been hiring illegal aliens and not checking them against the federal electronic database set up to allow them to check to see if you're hiring an illegal. Two of the illegals Trump exploited will be among the guests seated in the gallery on Tuesday when Trump goes to the House chamber to deliver the State of the Union address. Trump had another previously undisclosed meeting with Vladimir Putin, it was revealed this week. The White House continues to stonewall every effort to find out what went on at those secret meetings. And when Trump had the notes taken by a translator destroyed, he violated federal law twice. First, by destroying government property, and second, by violating the Presidential Records Act.
Oh,
Can't
how
make
about
this
that?
up.
Right. Meanwhile, on People to Be Heard this week, you can hear from the Purchase Performing Arts Center director, Seth Soloway. Very interesting comments on the upcoming season this spring at Purchase. And then you can see that at 7 p.m. Saturday and also on whiteplainsweek.com.
On many of these same stations or online on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com.
Right, yes, that's it. John
And WPCommunityMedia.com.
Right. Peter, you do the sign-off tonight.
Good night.
This has been White Plains Week, news and commentary about White Plains, Westchester, and the world. The views and opinions expressed on this program were solely those of the participants. White Plains Week, produced by White Plains Citizen Net Reporter and presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76 and Verizon Fios Channel 45. You may view White Plains Week anytime on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. For White Plains Week, this is Peter Katz speaking.